If it doesn't, I'll blame you. All right. Good. Well done. Ooh, good point.
So you got to invite the girls up to do Who's that? Yeah, copy.
All right, everyone. I was informed that we need to get this show on the road. All right. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are Sue and Bill Lasser, and neither one of us is the rabbi. So we are filling in. She is with family in Chattanooga. Welcome to our guests who are from as far away as the Netherlands and as close as down the street. So how wonderful is that? And Avi, where are you these days? In Boston. All right. So welcome, everyone. We're thrilled you're here. Thanks to you, we have a minion, which is pretty wonderful. So we will get started since Harold has lit the candles for us before sundown. We can say the blessing. Alice, Wendy, would you like to come up and say the blessing? I need a yarmulke. Oops. Hang on one second while I get a yarmulke for me and you guys.
You ever seen the Big Book? Blown up print. This is the large print version, so the service will take about 3 hours.
Here you go. Oh, they're inside out. There. Okay, and now, are you ready? All right. Amen. Thank you, girls.
Thank you. So those
Our order of service is here. All right. So that everybody turn to page 5 in your siddur, which you haven't looked. If you haven't looked at it in a while, opens right to left. I mean, Yeah, right to left. So page 5 is in what you think of as the back. And we will sing Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMelechim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ba'achem Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMelechim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMelechim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMelechim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All right, and if you will turn to page 11 for the Chunaranana. L'chunaranana l'Adonai, nari alatzur yishenu, nekatma panav b'todah, b'zmirot nari alo. And we turn to page 14 for Yismechu Hashamayim. Which is at the little red triangle. Let's do that in English, right?
Okay. At the red triangle. Why don't we all read together? The heavens shall be glad and the earth rejoice, the sea in its fullness roar, the meadows and all that grows in them exult. Even the trees of the forest shall sing praise as Adonai comes to judge the earth, judging lands with righteousness and peoples with divine truth.
And then we turn to page 17, and this we read responsively.
A psalm. Sing to Adonai a new song, for Adonai has wrought wonders. God's right hand and holy arm have brought deliverance.
Adonai declared deliverance. As nations looked on, God's righteousness was revealed.
God dealt faithfully and kindly with the house of Israel. The very ends of the earth saw our God's saving power.
Call out to Adonai, all the earth. Break out in joyful singing. Sing to Adonai to the music of the lyre, lyre and voices making music together. With horns and shofar cries, trumpet the presence of the sovereign Adonai.
Let the sea and all that is in it roar, the earth and all who inhabit it thunder. Let rivers clap hands while mountains sing in harmony, greeting Adonai, who comes to judge the earth, judging the world with justice and the nations with truth.
All right. And on page 20, we'll sing Roman Mood together. At the red triangle. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishakavu l'har kadsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishakavu l'har kadsho. ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romamu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romamu. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lehakadsho. And Mismoel David is on the following page, page 21, and we rise for this, please, if you are able. Havul Adonai b'nei Elim, Havul Adonai kavod ba'oz, Havul Adonai kavod shemo, Ishtachavu Adonai behadrat kodesh, Kol Adonai ha'amayim el hakavod hirim, Adonai el mayim rabim, Kol Adonai b'koach, Kol Adonai v'hadar, Kol Adonai shover arazim, v'yishaber Adonai et arzei Havanan, v'yechezem kimo ekel Levanon v'Zion, kimo ven re'emim. Kol Adonai chotzev lavotesh, Kol Adonai echayel midbar, echayel Adonai midbar kadesh, Kol Adonai echolel ayalot, vayechesov yeyarot, ubechelo kulo, kulo omer, kulo omer kavod. Adonai lamavu yashav, vayeshev Adonai melech leolam, Adonai yos yamo yitin, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. Adonai was enthroned above the floodwaters. Enthroned, Adonai is eternally sovereign. Adonai will grant strength to God's people. Adonai will bless them with peace. Please be seated. We will turn to the Chadodi on page 23. And our custom is to do the first two verses on 23, the middle verse on 24, Hitoruri, and the last two on 25. And at the last verse, it's our custom to stand and turn and physically welcome Shabbat as a bride or a queen as she comes through the door, which I've always thought was a cool idea. So, page 23. Pene Shabbat nekabela, lechadoti likrat kala. Pene Shabbat nekabela, shamor v'sachor b'dibur echad. Hishme'anu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. L'shem u'tiferet v'litila, lechadoti likrat kala. Pene Shabbat nekabela, likrat Shabbat l'chuven ilcha. Ki mikor habracha, merosh mikedem nesucha, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה, לך תודיף לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך ומי אורי, 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 שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה, לך דודי לקראת קלה, כני שבת נקבלה. ימין ושמאל תפרצי, ואת אדוני תריצי, היד איש בן פרצי, ונשמחה ונגילה, לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. And now we turn to page 27. So I'm going to do the old version. I hope that's okay with everybody. Tov lehodot l'Adonai, Tov lehodot l'Adonai, ולזמר, ולזמר, לשמחה העליון, טוב להודות לאדוני. Oh, okay.
Let's read responsibly. It is good to thank you, Adonai, and sing to your name most high, to proclaim your love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night.
Sing the lute, pluck the harp, let the sound of the lyre rise up.
You gladden me with your deeds, Adonai, and I shall sing of your handiwork.
How wonderful are your works, Adonai, how subtle your designs.
The arrogant do not understand, the fool does not comprehend this. The wicked flourish like grass, and every evildoer blossoms, only to be destroyed forever.
But you, Adonai, are exalted for all time.
Surely your enemies, Adonai, surely your enemies will perish. All who commit evil will be scattered.
As a wild bull raises up its horn, you raised my head high, anointed it with fresh oil.
As my enemies gather against me, my gaze remains steady, for my ears listen and hear.
The righteous flourish like the date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of Adonai, they flourish in our God's courtyard.
In old age they remain fruitful, still fresh and bountiful, proclaiming Adonai is upright, my rock in whom there is no flaw.
And at the red triangle, either on the Hebrew page or the transliteration page in the red, Tzadikata yifrach ke'erez bavanon yizkar shetulim bebeit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu. Od yenufon beseva, tishenim verananim come to our first Mourner's Kaddish of Friday night on page 30. Those whose custom it is to do, those who are in mourning, or those observing a yahrzeit, if you would please rise.
Yigadal b'yidra kadash shemei rabbah v'yamad divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayedecha be'Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kariv v'yimru amen Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach v'yolam u'mamei amaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yirmam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalel v'yitalal shemei dekudasha b'richu Liela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, da'amiram b'yalma b'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael b'imru. Amen. Aseh shalom b'mamav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael b'imru.
Amen. Peter and Robin, I don't have the list of whose yahrzeit we're observing. Can Francis Wachter.
May your memory be for a blessing.
All right. You're on.
All right.
Yeah?
Okay. All right. Well, as usual, when we've done services, Sue asked me to do a little Devar Torah, which is a very dangerous thing to do if you're asking a professor, and especially a professor between semesters, because I have to get in practice for January. So what I always say, I like this line so much that I repeat it every time, which is that this little Devar Torah will last 50 minutes and it will be followed by an exam. So good luck. Our Torah portion for this week is Miketz, which is the part of the story of Joseph. And it is the part of the story where his brothers return with his half-brothers, all return with his full brother Benjamin. And Joseph finally breaks down. And as we'll see, it ends on a kind of cliffhanger because the story goes on for another 6 or so chapters in full. But the story of Joseph is, of course, one of the most famous, not only in the Bible, but really in all of literature. The great German author Thomas Mann wrote a sort of 4-part book or series of books that are usually published together called Joseph and His Brothers. It, of course, was made into a hit Broadway play, Joseph and His Technicolor Dreamcoat. It's a major Disney film. It's a tremendous piece of just simply literature. And although this is obviously anachronistic, I think it's fair to say that the Joseph story is a kind of cinematic story. It has everything in it. It has the greatest moments in kind of world history at the time, famine that breaks out throughout the land, someone who has this sort of getting ahead story of a young man at the age of something like 17 who is thrown into a pit and is sold by his brothers into slavery, who rises up to become the second most powerful person in the kingdom of Egypt. It has a story of, as we've seen already, jealousy with his brothers, who then eventually are reunited with Joseph. That's in the portion for this week. And finally, it has the full story of how the Jews ended up in Egypt so that they could be redeemed from Egypt and eventually brought through the desert to Mount Sinai and eventually to back to the land of Israel. So from the human element and the jealousies and the sort of dysfunctional family of Jacob and his sons, all the way to these grand themes of history, to this sort of major theological moment in which the Jewish people are really created, or the Jewish nation at least is created from the slaves in Egypt. it's in a way to continue this sort of cinematic theme. It strikes me as a kind of prequel to the Exodus story. And I say that because scholars who have studied the Joseph story suggest that it originally comes from an Egyptian wisdom tale. And the purpose of these ancient wisdom stories was to make the point that we're just sort of going through life doing the best we can, while God is really directing traffic. Everything we do is part of God's plan. And of course, for the ancients, they were not monotheists, so it would be the gods who are directing traffic. And in the Jewish tradition and the later Western tradition, it is the one God who is directing all of our endeavors. And even though the activities may seem at times to be random, they're all part of this sort of plan. And so this story, and that's what it really was, existed long before, according to scholars anyway, long before it was put into the Torah in its current form. Of course, the lead characters changed. Originally, these were Egyptian figures, and then, or from other parts of the ancient Middle East, and then eventually, of course, the patriarchs get put into these leading roles in the show. And the problem was the Torah is, I think, as you know, according to at least to scholars, the Torah is an interwoven set of stories or set of traditions that go back to 3 or 4 sources. And you can trace these. And once scholars pointed this out, it's, of course, if you're a literalist or at least if you're someone who certainly not in the Orthodox tradition or the Hasidic tradition or in similar approaches from Christianity or Islam, you would say, well, the entire story is written by God in kind of one piece. But scholars go back and they find these different sources of the Bible, and that's why, just for example, the story of the creation is told twice, first in Genesis 1, where man and woman are created together, and then again in Genesis 2, where man is created and then Eve is created from Adam's rib. Those are 2 sort of, not duplicate because they're alternate, 2 alternate versions of the story told from 2 different sources. They both had enough authority that they couldn't ignore one of them, and so they kind of merged them together. And throughout the Joseph story, if you really want to read it and read some of the commentaries, you can find this interwoven nature of the story. There's inconsistencies in the story. For example, it's said that Joseph is sold into slavery to the Midianites, but it's also said that he's sold into slavery to the Ishmaelites. And so the rabbis kind of patch that together and say, well, the Midianites sold them to the Ishmaelites or something along those lines. But again, if you kind of interweave these 2 traditions. And from these 2 traditions, there are really 2 stories of the origins of the Jewish people. And the one is the Abraham story. And Abraham, of course, is told by God to leave his hometown in Mesopotamia and to go to the land of Canaan, or modern land of Israel. And there he stays, like more or less forever. I mean, that's the argument that Jews have been in the land of Israel since the time of Abraham. And that's the one story. And then the other story is a story that says the Jews were in Egypt as slaves, and then they had to get to the land of Israel by going through the 40 years in the desert. And those 2 stories come from these two of these different biblical sources. And the problem is that whoever, again, assuming for the moment that it was humans who put the story together, they had to get from one to the other. Right? They had to get from the story of, here we have Jacob living in the land of Israel, in the land of Canaan, and that's fine. And he could just stay there and all would have been well. But they have this other story that says, no, he got there from Egypt. So how do you get him from the land of Canaan to Egypt? That's why I say it's kind of a prequel, because it's almost as if you did a kind of Star Wars 1 and then Star Wars 3 and then went back to Star Wars 2, because you've got these 2 stories and you have to find the way you put them together, although Star Wars isn't in order anyway. So that's probably, if you're really into cinema, that's probably not the right way to put it. But, that story is that there's a famine in the land of Egypt, and really broader than that, in the entire known world. There's this massive famine, and in the story, the Israelites sent to Egypt for food, because there is food in Egypt, and we'll see that Joseph is responsible for there being food in Egypt, but they import food from Egypt. Eventually, they get more food from Egypt, and then Joseph invites them, his family, to go to Egypt where they'll be safe and where they will have food. But eventually, of course, an evil Pharaoh comes to power and enslaves them for 400 years. God says that I will make you a nation in Egypt. You'll be slaves. This is the story we read at Passover. But then you will be redeemed. You'll be freed. And you'll return to the land of Israel. And of course, that's where Moses, speaking of motion pictures, that's the Ten Commandments. And that's where Moses sort of steps in on stage and sort of completes the story. The Joseph story, as I said, is truly a literary story. Scholars call it a novella. Unlike all the other stories of the patriarchs, the story of Joseph isn't really episodic. And by that I mean the stories of Moses, for example, you hear little bits and pieces of the story. Moses strikes the Egyptian who's beating the Hebrew slave, the burning bush story, the story where he strikes the rock to get water. These are like episodes in his life. And that's true of Abraham, that's true of Isaac. You just get pieces. Sarah was 90 when she has her son. But you don't get the whole story. But with Joseph, you really get a story that's written to be sort of told as a tale, right? And it as I said, begins with the fact that he is the son of Jacob, but his mother is Rachel. You remember Jacob had two wives. He was tricked into marrying Leah, and then was able to marry Rachel 7 years later. And Rachel was the one he loved, truly loved. And so Rachel's children are Joseph, and then the youngest of all of them, who came along in Jacob's old age, Benjamin. And those are the two that he loves the most. And that starts the story because the other brothers, the half-brothers, if you will, of Joseph are very jealous of him because he's their father's favorite. And his father gives Joseph this beautiful coat of many colors as a sign. But imagine this time of year, you know, if it was a Hanukkah or a Christmas gift and you gave your favorite child this incredible gift. Of course, today they'd probably say, well, why would you give me this coat of many colors for? I wanted a video game or whatever. But you gave them this incredible gift, and others you kind of gave nothing or very little. You can imagine the kind of dynamic that would set up. And so when they have the opportunity, the brothers get rid of him. They literally, they want to kill him. And then Reuven intercedes and says, no, don't do that. And they sell him into slavery instead. What's interesting to me about this story, too, is that although it starts out as this tale, and as I said, very involved, it's literally starts in Genesis 37 and ends at the end of Genesis 50. And it's not all of that, but almost all of that is the Joseph story. It's a quarter of the book of Genesis. It's a lot of text for this story. And it coming from this old tale, as I said, this old wisdom, piece of wisdom literature. And the point of the wisdom literature was really that I said before, that God directs everything. But what's extraordinary about the story of Joseph is that although certainly we can see the hand of God behind the whole story, most of the story, there's very little of God's direct intervention. In other words, in the Abraham story, in the Isaac story, sort of God is more present. But here, God just sort of lets these characters, he sets the whole thing up and lets these dynamics play out. And they play out in these just unbelievable ways. Joseph, of course, is sold into slavery to this guy named Potiphar in Egypt, who's a very powerful member of the court. He's doing fine, and then Potiphar's wife basically tries to seduce him. He refuses, so she frames him, accuses him of sexually assaulting her, and so Potiphar puts him in prison. When he's in prison, he manages to get out of prison by telling what various dreams mean, and these predictions that he makes come true. And then later, one of the people who was in jail with him is in the court, and the Pharaoh's having these dreams and doesn't know what they mean. So he sends for Joseph, and Joseph interprets the dreams, and he figures out there's going to be a famine, and he starts putting food away, and he becomes the viceroy of the kingdom. I mean, all of this happens, and then the brothers come back looking for food, and he sets them up. Right, he sets them up for a trap. I brought my silver goblet with me because he plants. Eventually gets his brother Benjamin, gets them to bring his brother Benjamin to him, and then he plants a silver goblet in Benjamin's sack, and when they leave Egypt with their food, he sends people after them. They stop them, they search, they find that Benjamin has stolen this goblet. He returns back, and he waits, and what happens at the end is very powerful, and it's right at the beginning of next week's Parsha, actually, because as I said, this kind of ends on a very strange sort of cliffhanger. But at the end of the story, Reuven, who saved him years ago, says, look, he's going to let them all go free and make Benjamin a slave. And Reuben says, it'll kill my father if I don't bring him back. And I promised my father I would bring Benjamin back and take me instead. And at that point, Joseph realizes that his brothers have changed and that they've repented for their sins of the past, and he welcomes them with open arms. And as I said, then invites them to come down to Egypt to live. Jacob and the 70 original members of his family, the original Jewish people who come to Egypt. And of course, as we know, there's a tremendous irony in that, because he's inviting them to save them from the famine, and he invites them into what turns out to be 400 years of slavery, not his intention, which again seems like that was a bad idea, but then it turns out, of course, to be the origins of the Exodus and ultimately the return to Israel. And but it's all these human actions. It's the brothers being evil and jealous. It's Joseph putting them to the test. It's with a few exceptions, you could argue the dreams coming true, maybe God's intervention. But basically, this story is a very human story, played out, which I think kind of intensifies the original wisdom tale, which is that it doesn't look like God is doing anything. It looks like it's all human actions, human failings, human jealousies, human love, human redemption, all these things on a very human scale, and yet their actions turn out to create this much grander plan than none of them could have possibly seen before. I just want to end by saying that just in keeping with this parsha, we're reading the third section of the triennial cycle, so we're reading at the end. And here's the very end, the maftir of tomorrow morning's parsha. Judah and his brothers arrive at Joseph's house. He was still there, and they fell down before him on the ground. Joseph said to them, this is after the Benjamins had the goblet planted on him. They come back, they're brought back. Joseph said to them, how could you do such a thing? Don't you know that a man such as myself can learn the truth by divination? Judah said, there's nothing we can say to my Lord. How can we speak? There's no way we can clear ourselves. God has revealed your servant's guilt, so here we are, your slaves, both we and also the one in whose possession the cup was found, that is Benjamin. But Joseph replied, heaven forbid that I should act in such a way. The man in whose possession the goblet was found will be my slave, but as for you, go in peace to your father. And that's the season ending. Like, that's the end of the final season episode, and you're left wondering, like, what's going to happen? Like, it looks pretty bad, and we have to wait till next week, Vayigash, for the rest of the story. So, good job.
And now we start the service. That was all lead up. Please turn to page 39A and rise for Baruch. Please be seated. And we say, we turn to page 40. And just, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines up from the bottom. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגע יומם ולילה, ואהבת אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. And we'll do page 44 silently. I'm sorry, I skipped.
41.
41, please, for Shema. Almost skipped that, not good. Girls, do you want to lead Shema? When did you want to lead Shema? Would you like to lead the Shema? No? Okay. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchut Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'udecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher Anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam lefanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha b'derech uv'shachbecha uv'kumecha uv'shatam le'ot ha'yadecha v'hayu l'totafot b'neinecha uv'chatavtam al mezuzot beitecha uv'isharecha. Now page 44. Michamocha b'elim Adonai, Mikamocha nedor b'kodesh, norah tehilot u'sefer malchutecha u'vanecha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe, zeli anu v'yamru, Adonai yimloch v'olam va'ed, v'nehemar kifat Adonai et Yaakov, u'go'ala miyad hasak b'imanu, baruch ata Adonai, ga'al Yisrael. And we'll turn the page to 45 and read Hashkivenu in English, I think.
Let's read together at the top of the page. Allow us, Adonai our God, to sleep peacefully. Awaken us to life, O Sovereign. Spread over us your canopy of peace. Restore us with your good counsel, and save us for the sake of your name. Shield us.
Remove from us enemies, pestilence, sword, starvation, and sorrow. Remove the evil forces that surround us. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, for you, God, watch over and deliver us, And you, God, are sovereign, merciful, and compassionate. Ensure our going and coming for life and peace, now and forever. May you spread over us your canopy of peace. Baruch atah Adonai, who spreads the canopy of peace over us, over all the people of Israel, and over Jerusalem. Okay, and if you'll rise and turn to page 46 for V'Shamru. V'Shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asat et HaShabbat l'toratam b'rit olam. V'Shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asat et HaShabbat l'toratam b'rit olam. V'hinu b'nei Yisrael od hiliolam, od hiliolam, od hiliolam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asat et HaShabbat l'toratam b'rit olam. Ki shesh hashamim asa Adonai, asa Adonai, et hashamayim v'et ha'aretz. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asat et HaShabbat l'toratam b'rit olam. V'ayam hashvi Shabbat v'yinafash, Shabbat v'yinafash, Shabbat v'yinafash. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asat et HaShabbat l'toratam b'rit olam.
Yitgadal ve'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, Yamad yivrachute, v'yamlich machute, v'chayechon, u'v'yomechon, u'v'chayedecha beit Yisrael, v'yagala, v'yagala, u'v'zman karib, v'yimeru, Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach, Ya'alam Allah me'amaya, Yibarach, Yibarach, V'yishtabach, V'yibar, V'yiramam, V'yitnaseh, V'yit hadar, V'yit haleh, V'yit halal, Shemei dekudesha b'richu, Le'la mincha berchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Da'amiram yalma, V'yimeru, Amen.
It's now time for the silent Amidah, which is on page, page 47 through page 51. Obviously, if the words on the page speak to you, read through it. If not, this is our time to communicate with God however we wish. And please be seated when you're finished. We continue on page 51. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Takim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki Atahum Melech Adon L'chol HaShalom. Ki Atahum Melech Adon L'chol HaShalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. And we turn to page 53. And begin at the top of the page, Vayechulu Hashemayim, and continue at the bottom of the page with Magen Avot. Vayechulu Hashemayim v'haaretz v'chatevam. Vayechal Elohim bayom hashvi'i melachta asher asa. Vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol melachta asher asa. Vayevarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i. Vayekadesh oto ki bo Shabbat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim la'asot. And please rise for Magen Avot. Magen Avot bidvaro b'chaim etim b'mamaro ha'el hakadosh she'en kemohu hameniach li'amo b'yom Shabbat kadsho ki vam ratza lehaniach lahem ki vam ratza lehaniach lahem לפניו נעבוד ביראה ופחד ונדע לשמוע בחיום תמיד מעין הברכות אל ההודעות אדון השלום מקדש השבת מבורך שביעי ומניח בקדושה ויעמדו שני עונג זכר למעשה בראשית. And you may be seated, or you may continue standing for Kaddish Shalom if that is your custom.
Yigadavi Kadashim Rabba, Biamadi Rachurte, Biamlich Machote, Bechayechon, Bimechon, Bechayed, Chabet Yisrael, Bagalav is Mankarivi Imaru, Amen, Yeheshme Rabba Mavorach, Leolam Omeam Maya, Yit Barak, Yit Barak, Bishtavak, Yit Parvit, Ramami Nase, Bitadavi Talavi Talashem Edekudisha, Le'el, Amin Kabir Chata Vishirata, Tushbachata Benechamata, Damiran Biamavi Imaru, Tit Kabeatot, Ugatahon, Udachal, Kadam, Avuhon, Divashai Vimaru, Ishlama, Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Alinu Yachal Yisrael Vimaru, Aseh Shalom Ramav, Aseh Shalom, Alinu Yachal Yisrael Vimaru. Amen.
Seated. Our prayer for the sick is actually found on page 173 in the tiny little print on the top left. And this is the Debbie Friedman melody. Anybody would like to sing along, please
Do we
do.
want to do the names?
What? Oh, yes. Dan Siegel, Danielle Rice, Gittel Glasser, Ari Sanders, Phil Bucks, Lynn Alexander, Marjorie Morstein, Diane Hickey, Barbara Feingold, Harriet Siegel, Gloria Kahan Simon, Nadine Hyman, Ed Tansky, Irene Friedman, Gary Kramer, Arthur Stone, Francis Haber, Michelle Stupak, Caitlin Weathers, Danielle Santini, Julia Bernanke, Teresa Timmons, Esther Rowe, Suzanne Gott, Joan Klepp, Estelle Rice, Hannah Lipman, Susan Olar, Megan Cotigno, Natalie Kogan, Candice Dobro, Bernie Rowe, Danny Ashmore, Deborah Rubenstein, Betsy Kahn, Jennifer Block, Richie Zellen, Esther Wiener, Herb Silver, Alan Yust, and we were asked to add to this list Sheila Burkholz's mother, Goldie Burson. Are there any other sick among us that whose names we should mention? Cheryl Coquet is the other one. Anybody else? Sheberach Avotenu, Mikor HaBracha Imotenu, may the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Sheberach Imotenu, Mikor HaBracha Imotenu, bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Refuah shlema to all those in need of healing, physical, emotional, spiritual.
Amen.
We offer prayers for their healing. And now we turn all the way back for Aleinu. Please rise. Ladies, do you care to come open the ark? Bottom of the next page. Kakatu b'torataha, Adonai Rachel Ne'ema, V'chaya Adonai be seated. Oh, yes. Learner's Kaddish. If you're just your custom to rise, or are you observing a yard site, or you are in mourning, please rise.
Yikadav, Yikadash Shemei Rabbah, V'yamad Yivrach Yerutei, V'yamlich Malchutei, V'chayechon V'yamechon, V'chayedech al Beit Yisrael, Ba'ag Alav Yizman Kariv V'yimru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah, V'barach Le'olam U'amei Amaya, Yibarach V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar V'yitalev V'yithalal Shemei Dekudesha V'richu, V'yelah Min Kol Birchata V'shirata, Tush B'chata V'nechamata, Ta'amiran B'yalma V'yimru, Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu B'yal Kol Yisrael V'yimru, Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mamav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu B'yal Kol Yisrael V'yimru, Amen.
Please be seated. Harold, do you want to?
Good Shabbos, everyone. Welcome guests and friends and congregants, family.
Those of you who haven't met Harold Lefkowitz, Harold is our king of the synagogue and
No.
Always does the announcements for us, but nobody else from the board is here, so thank you, Harold.
Okay, I do not have the current announcements for this week. So I'm not sure who's sponsoring the ONEG tonight, but thank y'all for doing the service. And like I said, welcome everyone. The office is closed and will be reopening January 2nd at 10 a.m. The phones and email will be monitored. Well, nope. Gift wrapping is over. Thank you. The booth is put away. The mall is cleaned up. Next year, please prepare to volunteer. We were very short-handed this year. And it was a very busy time. Let's see what else is here. Join us tomorrow for a CBI Hanukkah-themed Kiddush lunch after the morning service. Remember to book your stay at the Southern Schmooze at Ramah, Durham. It's January 31st through February 2nd. It's a weekend of spiritual enlightenment. There's 5 or 6 other congregations from around the South that will be there with us and children. The cost of housing and all meals is only $185, which is just like one night in a hotel without food. So it's a really good thing to do. So far we have over 17 members going. We all hope that everybody that's here, except for those traveling far away, will attend. Registration deadline is fast approaching. Don't miss out. If you have any questions, please reach out to Rabbi Cohn. Weekly reminders. I'm assuming Fred is going to still have his intermediate Hebrew adult class at 11:15 on Sunday morning. The new Sunday morning adult class, well, we actually have to finish the last couple of chapters. Turning Points will be starting back around January 15th, whatever that Sunday is. The 12th is, that's also when Sunday school starts, right? And then Wednesday thereafter, is there a school? Have to look. Okay. Get back to me.
I will.
And I don't have the anniversaries and birthdays for this week, but those that have, we'll try to celebrate with you. Good Shabbos. And
Yes.
no. And join us later for the Kiddush. Go ahead. Wednesday's your anniversary. How many years, if you don't mind? 12. Good dozen. Huh? One more than her.
Good to know.
Very cool. Congratulations. Mazel tov. I don't have chocolate. The rabbi doesn't trust me. She gives me the keys to the synagogue, but doesn't trust me with her chocolate.
Does anybody else have any good news they'd like to share?
We have water bottles.
There will be a Oneg Shabbat, so there are desserts after this one last prayer. And since it is the third night of Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah, everyone. We will do a Don Olam to the tune of Ma'osur, Rock of Ages.
I'm going to explain why we didn't light the menorah.
What?
Why we didn't light the menorah.
Oh, we didn't light the menorah because you can't light the menorah after sundown, I assume.
On Shabbat.
Oh, yes, thanks to Harold. We do have a menorah. So to make this fit, you have to go back and do the first verse again, but that's what we're doing. Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra v'yet nasa v'chafzo kol azay melech shemo nikra v'yacharei kichlot hakol levato himloch nora v'hu haya v'hu hover v'hu yeh b'tifara Happy Hanukkah, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. Please join us in the social hall.